For years together, endless lies. I finally snapped and kicked her out. Was I wrong? When I look back at the last 4 years of my life, I can't decide whether to call it love, loyalty, or simply foolishness. We were together for so long that our lives were completely tangled. Her things in my apartment, our routines built around each other, our conversations echoing late into the night. On the surface, we looked like any other couple who had survived the rough patches and settled into comfort. But underneath, the cracks had been there from the beginning. The biggest issue was always the same: her guy friends. She had a handful of them, always texting, calling, making plans. From the start, it made me uncomfortable. I never told her who she could or couldn't talk to, but I asked for honesty, for transparency. Every time she swore up and down that they were just friends. Every time I told myself I should trust her. Every time I ignored that pit in my stomach. But the truth was, she couldn't stop. Even when I confronted her, even when we fought, even when she promised, she would still message them behind my back. Sometimes I caught her red-handed. Sometimes it slipped out in casual conversation, and every time I felt the same sickening punch of betrayal. 4 years of chances. For years of me saying, this is the last time. For years of me wanting to believe she loved me enough to finally stop lying. And 4 years of her proving, again and again, that my feelings didn't matter as much as her need for constant male attention. By the time that final fight came, I was no longer the calm, patient boyfriend I had once been. I was a man backed into a corner, exhausted, resentful, and ready to snap. And when I did, I made a decision that would change everything. I told her to get out. It happened on a night that started like so many others. Ordinary, almost boring. We were sitting in the living room, her phone lighting up every few minutes with notifications she tried to angle away from me. I didn't want to be that guy who checked over her shoulder, but after 4 years of half-truths and broken promises, my gut screamed that something was wrong. Finally, I asked, "Who's that?" She gave me the same tired answer she always did. "Just a friend." But this time, something in me cracked. It wasn't just jealousy or insecurity. It was years of pent-up frustration exploding all at once. I reminded her of every promise she had made, every late-night argument, every time she swore she would stop talking to these guys. And then I told her the truth I'd been holding back. I didn't believe her anymore. First, she tried to laugh it off. Then she switched to anger, accusing me of being controlling. She said things like, "I can't live my life under a microscope, and you don't own me." But I wasn't asking for ownership. I was asking for respect, for loyalty. The argument escalated. My voice got louder, hers sharper. And in that heat, I saw something in her eyes I had never wanted to admit. She didn't regret what she'd done. She regretted being caught. That's when the words flew out of my mouth before I could stop them. "Get out. If you can't respect me, if you can't stop lying, then you don't get to live here anymore." She froze. For the first time in years, I think she realized I wasn't bluffing. This wasn't another empty threat in the middle of a fight. This was real. And for me, it felt like crossing a line I couldn't come back from. The moment the words "get out" left my lips, the energy in the room shifted. For years, I had been the one chasing after her, trying to fix things, smoothing over fights, begging for scraps of honesty. But now, it was her turn to panic. First, she looked at me like she didn't believe it, like I couldn't possibly mean it. Then her face crumpled, and the tears came fast. "Please, don't do this," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'll stop. I swear this time, I'll stop. I'll block every single one of them. Just give me another chance." I had heard these words before, but this time they landed differently. There was no more weight in them. They were just echoes of the same promises she'd broken 100 times. She followed me around the apartment as I started gathering her things into a bag. Her hands clutched at my arms, trembling, her eyes wide with desperation. "I don't have anywhere else to go," she sobbed. "Where am I supposed to sleep? Please don't throw me out like this. I love you. You know I love you." But love, I realized, isn't begging someone to ignore your lies. Love isn't pushing someone to their breaking point and only showing remorse when you fear losing your comfort. I told her, calmly but firmly. "You've had 4 years to prove that love. You've had more chances than anyone deserves. And every single time, you chose them over me." She collapsed onto the couch, her body shaking with sobs, as though the weight of what was happening finally crushed her. She tried to paint me as cruel, heartless, abandoning her with nothing. But inside, I felt something new, clarity. For once, I wasn't the fool. For once, I wasn't buying the tears that I knew she expected me to fold, like I always did. But not this time. This time, the begging only hardened my resolve. Her sobs echoed through the apartment, bouncing off the walls like accusations. I stood there, watching her crumble, but instead of softening, my chest felt heavier with a strange mix of anger and liberation. I had seen this act before. The crying, the promises, the sudden desperation whenever she realized I might actually leave. And every time before, I had caved. I had told myself she needed me, that love meant giving one more chance. But this time, I wasn't seeing the woman I thought I loved. I was seeing the pattern, the endless cycle that kept me trapped. She tried another tactic. She straightened herself up, wiping her cheeks with the back of her hand, and her tone shifted from desperation to defiance. "You're really going to do this to me? After everything I've given you? After all these years?" I laughed bitterly, because the truth was, I couldn't think of much she had given me besides stress and sleepless nights. I had given her a home, stability, loyalty, chance after chance. And she had given me broken promises, suspicious messages, and the constant feeling that I was never enough. That I told her that. I said, "You don't get to play the victim now. I begged you for honesty. I begged you to respect me. You couldn't. So don't stand there and pretend like I'm the one destroying this." That's when she snapped. Her voice rose, sharp and venomous. "Fine. Maybe I did talk to them. Maybe I needed attention because you weren't enough for me." The words hit harder than any punch. For 4 years I had buried that fear, that deep insecurity whispering in the back of my mind. And now she said it out loud, weaponized it to hurt me. In that moment, everything inside me went quiet. No more arguing, no more back and forth. Just silence. Because that was the final straw. I looked at her and said, "Then there's nothing left to talk about. Pack your things. Tonight." For the first time, she realized I wasn't bluffing. The tears came back, heavier than before, but they no longer moved me. All I felt was a cold, steady certainty that I should have had years ago. And in that silence, I finally understood. I wasn't losing her. I was freeing myself. The apartment felt like it had shrunk to half its size, the air thick with tension as I watched her drag herself toward the bedroom. Her sobs had turned into quiet sniffles. The kind of sound you make when you finally realize the fight is over and nothing you say will change the outcome. She opened the closet and began pulling her clothes from the hangers, shirts, dresses, hoodies she used to borrow from me and claim as her own. I stood in the doorway, arms crossed, my stomach twisting as the memories crashed in with every item she packed. There was the red sweater I bought her on our first trip together, the one where we got caught in the rain and laughed so hard our sides hurt. There were the jeans she wore on that summer night when we stayed out too late, sneaking into a pool like reckless teenagers. And there was the faded band t-shirt I had given her, which she always said smelled like me even after it had been washed 100 times. Each piece of clothing felt like a reminder of the years we had stitched together, years that now unraveled with every fold. Every stuffed bag. It was surreal. How could love collapse so quickly? How could 4 years of laughter, fights, and whispered apologies dissolve into silence and the rustle of packing fabric? She muttered under her breath while she worked, her words sharp, aimed at me like darts. "You'll regret this. You'll miss me when I'm gone. No one will love you the way I did." I didn't answer. For once, I didn't take the bait. Instead, I let the weight of her words hang in the air, hollow and meaningless. Because the truth was, I wasn't afraid of missing her anymore. I was afraid of staying and losing myself to one point. She pulled a small photo album from the drawer. Pictures of us smiling, arms wrapped around each other, faces lit with the kind of joy you can't fake. She froze, staring at one of the photos for a long time. Then she tossed the album onto the bed like it was nothing. And in that moment, I realized something. She was mourning the loss of comfort. Not of me. By the time she zipped up her last bag, the bedroom looked emptier, colder. The place we once called ours suddenly felt like it was only mine again, though it didn't feel like home, yet that I should have felt victorious. But all I felt was drained. Because even as she packed away her things, I knew she couldn't pack away the years of scars she had left behind. When the last zipper closed and the final bag hit the floor, The silence in the room was deafening. She stood there for a moment, her arms crossed, her eyes swollen from crying, glaring at me as if I were the one who had ruined everything. I leaned against the doorway, my body heavy, my heart caught somewhere between relief and grief. She lifted one bag, then another, and started the slow walk down the narrow hallway toward the front door. Each step felt like it echoed through my chest. The thud of her suitcase wheels against the floor sounded like a drumbeat announcing the end of us. I followed a few steps behind, not because I wanted to stop her, but because I needed to see it through. Part of me still expected her to turn around, to throw herself at me and beg one more time, to try to manipulate me with promises and tears. But she didn't. She just kept moving, her back straight, her head tilted slightly down. The weight of 4 years hanging off her shoulders in duffel bags and overstuffed suitcases. When she reached the door, she paused. Her hand rested on the handle, trembling slightly. She turned her head just enough to look at me out of the corner of her eye. "This is what you want?" she asked, her voice low, hoarse from all the crying. For a brief second, 1,000 memories surged up. The first time she said she loved me. The way she used to fall asleep with her head on my chest. The small moments that had made me believe we could last forever. But then I remembered the lies, the broken promises, the nights spent staring at the ceiling wondering who she was texting. And I nodded. "Yes," I said, steady and calm. "This is what I want." Her lips pressed into a thin line, and she yanked the door open. The cool night air swept in, carrying with it the scent of rain and asphalt, a reminder that the world outside hadn't stopped just because my relationship had. She dragged her bags out, one by one, refusing to look at me again as the door finally shut behind her. The apartment was swallowed in silence. I stood there staring at the doorframe, my chest heaving as if I had just run a marathon. The space around me felt both larger and emptier, like the walls had pulled back but taken all the warmth with them. And in that hollow silence, it hit me. I had finally done it. I had finally let go. But letting go doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. The door clicked shut, and for the first time in 4 years, I was alone in my own apartment. The silence pressed down on me, heavier than I expected. No sound of her footsteps pacing the floor, no constant buzz of her phone lighting up with messages, no background noise of arguments waiting to erupt. Just silence that I sat down on the couch, the same one we used to curl up on during movie nights, and stared at the spot where her bag had been only minutes earlier. It felt strange, like the air was different, lighter but also raw. I ran my hands over my face, trying to process the storm that had just passed. At the tea first came the guilt. The image of her crying, begging me not to throw her out, replayed in my mind. Her words echoed. "I don't have anywhere else to go." My chest tightened. Had I been too harsh? Was I really making her homeless? For a second, I almost reached for my phone to call her back, but then reality punched through. This wasn't the first time she'd cried. This wasn't the first time she'd begged. Every tear, every promise, every plea had always ended the same way. Another lie, another betrayal. Another night staring at the ceiling wondering what she was hiding. I reminded myself. She hadn't been thrown out overnight. She'd been given chance after chance, year after year. For years of forgiveness. For years of swallowing my pride while she tested the limits of my patience. This wasn't cruelty. This was finally choosing myself. Still, the apartment felt empty. I walked into the bedroom and saw the empty side of the closet, bare hangers clinking together where her clothes had hung. The nightstand she always cluttered with her things was now clean, almost sterile. The absence was sharp, like a wound. The first night was the hardest. I lay in bed, the silence pressing against me, the sheets colder than usual. My mind kept drifting back to her. Not just the lies, but the good moments too. The vacations, the laughter, the inside jokes. My heart ached with the weight of what was gone. But as the hours passed, a strange calm settled in. No phone buzzing suspiciously beside me. No late-night arguments. No pit in my stomach, waiting for the next disappointment. For the first time in years, I wasn't on edge, and that's when it hit me. Yes, I had ended something. But maybe, just maybe, I had saved myself. The next morning, the reality of what I'd done started to spread. It began with a few texts from mutual friends. "Hey, what happened?" "She said you kicked her out." Some messages were neutral, just curious. Others were laced with judgment, accusing me of being heartless. Apparently, She wasted no time painting me as the villain. She told people I had blindsided her, that I threw her out with nowhere to go, that I'd made her homeless. She left out the part about the years of lies, the endless cycle of betrayal, and the countless second chances I had given her. To her friends, I was the monster. To mine, I was the guy who finally had enough. When my best friend called, his voice was firm. Man, it was about time. We've all seen how she treated you. You did what you had to do. Hearing that steadied me, because deep down, I knew it was true. But still, there was that whisper in the back of my mind, the one that asked if I had been too cold, too final.at work. It was harder to focus. I caught myself zoning out, wondering what she was doing, where she was sleeping. I hated myself for even caring. But after 4 years, habits don't disappear overnight. Then came the social media storm. She posted vague quotes about betrayal, heartbreak, and being abandoned by the person you trust most. People commented with sympathy, calling her strong, telling her she deserved better. I read them in silence, a knot tightening in my stomach. But the truth was, I wasn't the villain. I was the guy who had begged for honesty, who had compromised until there was nothing left to give. I had carried a relationship on my shoulders while she chipped away at my trust piece by piece. And finally, I had put it down. That evening, as I sat alone in the apartment, I realized the outside noise didn't matter. People would believe whatever story they wanted. What mattered was that, for the first time in years, I wasn't lying to myself. And maybe, just maybe, that was worth being misunderstood. A few days passed, and the chaos around me began to settle. The texts slowed down, the whispers faded, and I was left with something I hadn't had in years. Quiet at first, the silence was uncomfortable. It forced me to sit with my own thoughts, with no one else to blame or distract me. I walked through the apartment and saw pieces of her still lingering. A forgotten hair tie under the couch, a mug she used every morning for coffee, a note she once left on the fridge that read, "Love you. Always." Those little ghosts of our relationship pulled at me, but instead of breaking me, they made me think that I started to ask myself hard questions. Why did I stay so long? Why did I let myself believe the lies, even when the evidence was right in front of me? Why did I convince myself that love was enough to excuse betrayal after betrayal? The truth was painful. I realized that, for years, I had been afraid of being alone. I thought that if I left her, I'd be empty, unworthy, unlovable. So I clung to a relationship that drained me, convincing myself that one more chance would fix everything. But sitting there, in the quiet of my own space, I finally understood. Being alone wasn't the enemy. Being with someone who made me feel alone, that was. And then I thought about her. Not with bitterness, but with clarity. She wasn't going to change, not because she couldn't, but because she didn't want to. She thrived on the attention, the drama, the chaos. And no matter how much I gave, it was never going to be enough. That realization hurt. It stung deep, but it also set me free. Because once you accept the truth, there's no going back to the lies that I wasn't perfect in the relationship. I had my flaws, my insecurities, my anger. But I had been loyal. I had been forgiving to a fault. And I had given her more chances than anyone deserved. Now, for the first time, I was beginning to understand that choosing myself wasn't selfish. It was survival. The first weekend after she left, I woke up and realized something strange. I wasn't bracing myself for an argument. No tension lingered in the air. No suspicion clawed at my chest. The apartment was quiet, still, almost peaceful. For the first time in years, I could breathe without feeling like every breath carried the weight of someone else's lies. That I made coffee and sat by the window. The same spot where I used to wait for her to come home hours late, inventing excuses about where she had been. This time, there was no waiting. Just me, the warmth of the cup in my hands, and a sunrise that felt like it belonged only to me. Of course, there were still pangs of grief. I caught myself reaching for my phone to text her about something funny I'd seen, before remembering I had blocked her. At night, the bed still felt too big, the empty space beside me a reminder of what was gone. But slowly, I began to understand. Those feelings weren't about missing her. They were about unlearning a routine I had outgrown. My friends started inviting me out more, saying it was good to see me without the constant shadow I used to carry. Even my parents, who had been polite but cautious around her, admitted they were relieved. "We just wanted you to be happy again," my mom said softly. And for the first time, I believed I could be. I started picking up hobbies I had let die during the relationship, running in the mornings, sketching in the evenings. I felt pieces of myself returning, pieces I hadn't even realized I'd lost. The more I leaned into that, the more I realized how much of my identity had been buried under keeping her happy. The nights were still the hardest. Memories crept in, whispering doubts. But instead of fighting them, I let them pass through me. They weren't chains anymore, just echoes. And echoes fade. One night, I wrote in a journal. I didn't make her homeless. I made myself free. Seeing the words on paper was like closing a door. It reminded me that ending things wasn't about punishment, but about survival, about reclaiming the right to peace. For the first time in years, I wasn't defined by the chaos of someone else's choices. I was defined by my own. And as I turned off the lights that night, sliding into the quiet of an empty bed, I smiled to myself. Because the story wasn't about losing her anymore, that it was about finally finding me. Thank you for watching this story on True Tales Hub. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss our next story. That we post new tales twice a day, and each one comes with unexpected twists you won't see coming.